Welcome to the show. Senior executive producer at the Action Network. He was a sports business reporter for ESPN for 12 years and CNBC for 6 years. Welcome, Darren Rovell, to Advantage Connors. How are you, Darren?
Hey guys, how are you? Great to be
Yeah,
here.
it's a good day. It's a good day. So I've got to just jump in right away. Tell me what you thought of the last. It was my favorite time of the year when March Madness hit. Tell me what you think of March Madness and the result.
Well, I mean, I think anytime you can say sports is, unpredictable. It's like when there was a guy, he didn't bet it last night, but there was a guy who for the Final Four bet $700,000 on Gonzaga as 14-point favorites over UCLA. Because he thought $70,000 was easy money, and that guy was sweating,
Right.
and that's why we play these games. And anytime you're sure of it, I mean, just even last night, from a betting perspective, people were jumping all over Gonzaga because I think they just wanted an undefeated season to happen. It was very much like 2008 with the Patriots. I was in the locker room in 2008 at that Super Bowl, and the problem from a media perspective is you have to go down and talk to the players. So there was like 5 minutes to go, and all of us had gone down, and we are standing in the Patriots locker room. And there is no sound anywhere, and there's no TVs. We're in the bowels of the stadium. So we all assume the Patriots have completed a perfect season. And then we hear like a roar, and then all of a sudden, all of us are in the Giants locker room. So people want that perfection. I think the only time, by the way, where it was like that was probably the '86 World Series with the Mets and the Red Sox, where everyone was in the Red Sox locker room for Game 6. And then someone comes running down saying, ball went through Buckner's legs, and they all go to the Mets locker room. But I think people wanted Gonzaga. They wanted perfection. And Baylor was just unbelievable.
Yeah, Baylor was the underdog, correct? I mean, 4 or 5 points or so.
It was the first time they were an underdog in more than a year in any of their games. Obviously, they were a number 1 seed. By the way, Scott Drew, the coach of Baylor, he was not strong in basketball when he was in high school. He was actually the number 2 singles player at Valparaiso High School. So he was a tennis player.
Hey, how about that? There you go. There you go. But
probably had some sort of Connors racket going.
The old T2000. I hope that would be cool.
Exactly.
I'm an old Bruin, and it broke my heart. When they lost in the semis there, they had a hell of a run, and for me, I wish the Bruins would have gone on, but it kind of. Gonzaga beats them, in an unbelievable game. And from my standpoint, I was kind of rooting for Gonzaga, because they beat the Bruins and then to go on and to have that perfect season. You're right. There's something about perfect that kind of grabs onto you and says, this, just to say, I mean, they're still talking about the Dolphins' perfect season,
Yep.
Back in the 70s,
1972, right? And then it's amazing, you have the perfect season in 1972 with the Dolphins, and then you have the perfect season in 1976 at Indiana. There is something to closing in on perfection. And Jimmy, I think you could probably relate to this when you're going through a tournament and you're winning and you're not losing a set. And then when you get to the end, there's a little bit more pressure. That actually happened in 1976 in Indiana for their last game against Michigan for the title in '76. They were down at the half by 6 points, and they were in a tough position. So I think there's something about as you close in on perfection that the vice clamps in a little bit more. And that was, I think, with Gonzaga even down 10, I would have pay-per-viewed to see that locker room, man.
Seems like it's difficult too when you hit like one of those crazy, buzzer beater shots. It's such a high that you have that it's tough to come down and refocus for the next game. And there's a little bit.
Yeah, and I also think the weirdness of not having fans. Not having. That's something. Jimmy, what would you have done on that day in 1991 against Crickstein if you were in a blank stadium. You could have lost.
Take it easy now.
But you were all on the crowd. The crowd got you. Like the biggest thing, and this is one of the factors in gambling too. It's like, who are the guys who don't need a crowd? And who are the guys who need like, we've never had to ask this question in sports.
Really good point.
In 20th century sports, like, who's going to be, especially for like, now, obviously last year for me, it was baseball. It's like, who's the guy? Like, for me, we were talking about like Mike Trout versus Bryce Harper. To me, Mike Trout is very cerebral, loves the game, keeps inside himself. He's good. But like, if you look at like Bryce Harper, like, no, he needs someone to pump him up. He's a Vegas guy. He loved to pump people, he loves to get that pump up. So this year, obviously from a fan standpoint, it's been different, but from an athlete standpoint, it's been interesting to see. And I just, it's so weird to see no crowds or crowds of 5,000 people.
Yeah. That electricity and that excitement and that sixth man, if you want to call him that, from the stands is something that, athletes beg for, really, to have, to show what they have and to have the crowd get behind them and to push them to that next level, to help them come through and to be the champion. You're right. But I also think that champions figure it out and figure out a way to motivate themselves. And to give them that themselves that shot in the arm to go over the top and excuse me and to come out the winner. No crowd for me. I love the crowd. I love the excitement even before the match started. The walking through the crowd to the court was probably the most exciting walk I've ever had.
Right, which is also the worst part about giving up Forest Hills for Flushing Meadows, right? I mean that. I'm 42 years old, and I lived on Long Island in Roslyn on Long Island. Haven't missed a U.S. Open, but I'm not what was Forest Hills last year was what 80 or 81? I can't even remember. But,
last year at Forest Hills was 77 was the last year, and then 78 they moved to Flushing.
Right, so I was born in 78. Never had a chance. Now the walk, obviously there's been a lot of things in sports, like as kids of the 80s, like we got to see things, we got to do things that today you never get to do with athletes. Like I still remember walkthroughs. There were still walkthroughs to the court. Right. Like, but it just wasn't the same as my parents described, like you could reach out and touch, and with each decade, it got harder to do that. But that's, I part of the reason why I love being a sports reporter and had to be into sports is because of how close I was able to get in the 80s to athletes. I'll never forget, going to a hotel and asking for Tony Gwynn's autograph. And I legitimately, as an 11-year-old kid, had a 15-minute conversation, sit down kid, in the hotel lobby with Tony Gwynn. And It's like, God, I just wish that we, and I know it's totally different, but I just wish that athletes and kids were as close as athletes of kids of the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, those days are over. Yeah.
You look at, Jimmy, you look at these sporting news magazines and you look at these old things and it's like tennis camp, 1975 or whatever. And it's like Connors McEnroe. It's like $50 for the week. It's like, what?
We were killing it.
It's amazing. They had football camps and you're looking, you're like Hall of Famer, $100 for the week,
Yeah, it's crazy. It was, I love the up close. I mean, we go and practice at when we first went to Flushing Meadows and even at the old Forest Hills, and the people would just be right at the fence. I mean, we go to to cross sides, and we'd sit there and have a conversation with the fans, which to me, I mean, they're paying their hard-earned bucks to come and watch us play. I mean, they deserve to have that up close and personal, I think. But that all changed in tennis when they had the unfortunate incident with Monica Seles.
Oh God!
And which
that was it.
which changed everything. Yeah. Then security started coming, and then a lot of other things happened since then. And you get what you have today. But the fans, to have been able to play in front of them, and I mean, talking about fans, we got the Masters coming up.
Well, even just before we go on to that overhead.
Brett's got to take control of this.
Well, that overhead shot they used to shoot at the U.S. Open with you guys walking, or whoever it was walking from the locker room to the court, had like a boxing feel to it. Like Darren said, like you'd be able to almost reach out and, probably not get a high five, but maybe touch the bag, or, you reach out and touch your favorite player.
Yeah, it definitely was like a boxing entrance. I mean, now they try to do it, but it's just not that, it's ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, and it's okay, and I'm sitting all the way at the, I see ants on the.
I know, it's a huge stadium now.
Yeah.
So I see your hat, Arnie.
Yep. Yeah.
Nice.
One of, luckily, he's just one of those guys that I got to interview, and I guess one of the coolest moments that I had in my reporting career is to have an Arnold Palmer with Arnold Palmer. It doesn't really get better than that. So,
that's pretty cool.
He was an incredible man and great ambassador of the game. Both him and Jack are just, I'm sure you've had your dealings with both of them, and just quality guys.
Yeah, exactly. You look back at in the past, and this is what I like about golf, is the way they treat their past, and they hold them on such a pedestal. Not Palmer and Nicklaus and Gary Player and Byron Nelson and Sam Snead, and the way they treat them and hold them in such esteem, for what they've done, for not only their time, but what they've done for the game to where it is now. I think golf does that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they do that better than any other sport.
I agree. I think tennis is close. Tennis has an issue, though, with technology. So, like, from the racket standpoint, right? So I think golf gets over the technology. So I have a guy, Byron. I have Bryson DeChambeau, who drives it 350 yards. And I think, Jack, if you look at Jack, well, it's just as sweet. It's the swing. And I don't think that current tennis fans appreciate the mechanics of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s as much, because maybe the game is totally different. But I do think from the standpoint of actual, treating them and thinking it's the same game, I think you're right on that.
What do you think about the Masters? They just played it in November, right. And now Dustin Johnson, the Masters champion, and now 5 months later they're playing it again, and he's coming in as defending champion. But what are you looking for there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Jordan Spieth is so interesting. You think back in golf of guys who played so hot. And I don't know if you have this in tennis. I think in golf, it's a lot of you versus nature, and tennis has head games, but golf, man, that is a maze inside your head. And if you look at guys like David Duval, who are number one in the world and can win everything and then can win nothing, and you have a guy like Jordan Spieth, who is winning literally everything. And we're talking about signs a 10-year deal with Under Armour, and this guy's the next big thing, and Tiger can't even, he's now in Tiger prime. And then from 2017, from the Valero Open till last week, he doesn't win a stinking tournament.
Crazy.
That's insane. And the Masters is magical. How green it is, and when you go, and the tradition, and how few people are there relative to other golf tournaments. But it's so hard to call. I mean, from a betting standpoint, I think, I've learned not to take shots on who the winner will be. You got to do top 5, top 10. If you do too many of those shots of who's going to win, because you're licking your chops at 80-1, man,
Right.
you better come through big that one time you win. Otherwise, I'm not sure if you have a roof over your house anymore. So, yeah.
What do you think about DeChambeau? Did you see the tweet of him just launching
the
balls?
VJ launching balls? Man, the way he's torquing his body looks like it hurts. I mean, I know he's like a biophysicist with the way he's figured out every torque and this and that, and decides that he's going to get ripped beyond belief, and that that's safe. But man, that like people are like VJ Singh looking on, admiring him, and I'm like, is he admiring him, or is he like saying like, what the hell is this? Not only is he like, yanking and like having this motion, but like he's doing it every 5 seconds. Like he's not relaxing, or like golf, it's like you put the ball on the tee, you hit it. Ball on tee. He's just launching and like so I actually like the fact that there's a guy that in a game that is slow and pretty predictable, like you have a guy where you're like, what the hell is this?
Right.
And he's telling you, I got it figured out. I've done all this. This makes sense. Trust me. And then, can actually win. And he's a young guy, and he's full of confidence and boffo. And I think people love that. It's great for the game.
Yeah. My back hurts watching him swing. I just can't believe it.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And, you have guys over time who have, non-traditional motions, McEnroe serve or whatever, like things that just look a little bit weird, but like that just looks really weird.
Yeah. They're doing it so fast is what seems
and
like.
The fast, like why so fast? Like, are you in a rush? Like, why would you do it fast? Because when you're thinking about fast, like I think about like, I'm gonna be doing some CrossFit or something, and I pull out my, like those 30-minute, where you're going through things fast. Seems like you'd get hurt that way, but I guess he has his method down.
Yeah, and you're not going to hit it fast on 18, on Sunday. You're going to take your time hopefully on the shots.
It's not like anyone's going to want to go through you. I mean, this is a professional tournament here. But I was, you mentioned Gary Player. I used to go to his charity golf tournament, and I was talking to Freddie Couples, and I said, Freddie, and this is like the charm of the 70s and 80s. And Jimmy, I'm just going back because I just want people to understand like how willy-nilly it was and how unplanned things were. So I said to Fred, I'm like, all right, so you were at the University of Houston with Jim Nance, roommate in 1980. And then like, I saw like in 1981, like there was some sort of weird thing that went down with you going pro. And he goes, yeah, I was visiting my girlfriend in California, and there was this club that was there, and it said PGA tournament. And I went up there and I said, hey, can I play? And he's like, yeah, you're Freddie Couples. You're the top amateur in the country. He goes, but if you play and you take the money, you can't, you're actually turning pro. So Freddie's like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Like what? And he tees up and takes 14 grand and then calls his dad, who didn't know he was doing it. He's like, hey, Dad, just turned pro. Right. And the dad's like, what the hell are you doing? Like that was the 70s and 80s. Like, who would do that today? He's the top amateur in the country. He's like, okay, let's play golf. Like what? Right. So those things were crazy. And I actually had and then it was also, I'm sure you remember, all with the 70s and 80s and all these small tennis tournaments in between the big tennis tournaments, like at country clubs. Like my grandfather was like the head of tennis at Tamarack, at Woodmont Country Club in Tamarack, Florida. You came in a helicopter, landed on something, in 83, 84. Right. And it's like, it was every player was there at a country club. Like, get out of here. This was the best of times.
Yeah, it was a great time. You're right. But it's amazing what started it, sports, all sports, and how it started and the ride that it had to get to where it is now. I mean, to go back and to think that, the places that we played were just a thought of being built, and then what
It had
took to
there
build-
was a court, and medal stands. That's what
Right.
it was.
That's what it was, right in the middle of a cornfield in a lot of places. And we started drawing fans and people liked what we were doing. And, pretty soon things started happening, and it's grown into what it is today. But it's been fun to see all that. And, walking in a 25,000 seat stadium saying, yeah, back in the early 70s, we were walking in a 2,500 seat stadium back then, and happy to get it, which was pretty cool though.
It's amazing because when I told my parents, I said, I like the green pages of USA Today as much as the red pages of USA Today. I stop, right? And that's for us old people who actually read a newspaper, but it was the business section and then the sports section. And I said, I want to be a business journalist, but I want to cover the business of sports. And my mom, and this was in 1999, and my mom was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no one talks about it. It's billions and billions of dollars, and there's no one who covers it nationally." And it's just been amazing covering it for the last decade, 2 decades, and just seeing how if you don't understand the business today, you actually can't be a good fan. If you don't understand why, like, are the tennis players, or the ATP, are they unionized, are they not, where's the prize money coming from, how to, all this stuff, your owner's capacity to spend, if you're a fan of a pro sports team, how base year compensation matches up, how draft picks back. If you don't understand that, you're just the dumb guy on the radio. And so, it's been amazing to like be a part of that and follow kind of the rise and the importance of just understanding the business of things.
So did you get into gambling as like a natural progression of that, or have you always been interested in gambling?
So I was only interested in gambling because it got people's attention. So when I went to Northwestern and I was a freshman, and I didn't want to toil in the daily paper, which was the harder paper to do, and there was a weekly paper. And the weekly paper was like scattered on the floor of the bathroom, really wasn't thought of as, it was thought of as a rag essentially. And I said, well, what happens if I make the sports all betting? And then all of a sudden people started reading it, right? Like, so it was just my means to relevance. And that's what it was. And, so I covered gambling over the years, a little bit at ESPN, a little bit at CNBC. And so I had gone to ESPN, went to CNBC, back to ESPN. And, I had a little bit left on my ESPN deal in December 2018. And the Supreme Court had basically said now states can decide whether they want gambling or not. And I'm sitting here in New Jersey, and they're the ones that brought the case against the Supreme Court. And I'm saying, holy hell, New Jersey is going to be the sports gambling capital of the world. And they opened it up in a way that no other state had. There's 27 mobile sports books. And in 2020, $6.3 billion was bet on sports in New Jersey, and they trounced Nevada. So I just felt that, I wanted to be in a place where, there was relevance. And I probably do about 80% betting now, which is fine. I mean, part of me was like, are you going to like this? Are you going to give up the sports business? But as you know, I still do the sports business stuff on Twitter. And if there's a big story, I'm going to do it. I've been covering the memorabilia world like crazy and I know you want to talk about that too. I mean, just covering how crazy cards and all this memorabilia has gone in COVID has been exciting as well.
Is that turned into be what's old is new? Again?
A little bit. Like, so there's a couple things that happened. When COVID happened, people started cleaning their houses like never before, right? Like all of a sudden we have time, right? Not only am I 7 feet from my pantry in my office and trying not to be 300 pounds, but I'm also going through my closets and seeing what's in there. And not only that, parents are going through closets and they're seeing things and they say, hey, do you want to keep this? So that's one thing. So that's old is new. This is old. And now I want it. Don't throw it out. And then the other thing is, when every day is Groundhog Day, you have to remember the past that you smiled. I mean, let's be honest here. And so I think there was something to looking back to the days of old. And I think finally it was in terms of buying cards, buying memorabilia, buying things. There's a dopamine rush when you buy something on eBay or you win an auction and to be honest with you, not to make it like an addictive thing, but we needed that too. When we don't have normal human interaction, we have to create things that are firing in our head. Otherwise, like our brain dies.
Right.
And so I don't want to make it like too crazy here, but I do think that some of the collecting and all the stuff that started happening comes out of necessity for us to survive in a world we've never known.
I was talking to Brett about it, and geez, I've moved. I left Illinois when I was a young kid, and I was thinking that when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, I had shoe boxes full of trading cards, back from the 50s and the 60s, and and I'm just thinking that
you want to throw up.
Now I do. I'm feeling that now. It's crazy.
But let me, Jimmy, let me make you feel better, okay? If you didn't throw them out, then no one would have thrown them out. And if no one threw them out, they wouldn't be worth anything.
Well, yeah, right? Exactly. I mean,
you have to think of it. You have to think of it that way. And just to tell a little story, because this is one of my favorite. In 1952, Topps started making cards, and the 1952 Mickey Mantle became, now the best condition 1952 Mickey Mantle is worth about $30 million. Okay, but in 1952 they made two sets of cards. They made cards 1 through 300, and then later in the season a higher number of cards, and Mickey Mantle was card number 311. He was in the second set. They couldn't sell those. People were bored by the time, like, it's deep into the season. They couldn't sell those. So it was 10 cents a pack, and then they went to 5 cents a pack, and they went to 1 cent for 5 cards, and they still couldn't get rid of them. And they still couldn't get rid of them by 1959. So here we are with 1952 cards. It's 1959. No one could get rid of them. So they brought them on a barge in Staten Island and dumped them all into the ocean. And that's why, a 1952 Topps Mickey, again, they threw them out. So don't feel bad about you throwing them out. They actually dumped them.
I'm not feeling bad, but Brett's kicking me under the table here. What the hell, what'd you do that for?
We'll create our own supply.
What did you say, Brett?
I said we'll just get rid of most of the supply. We'll create our own supply.
Were you a saver of your gear or a giver?
I gave a lot of every match I walked off. I gave everything away. My shoes, my wristbands, my shirts, everything, and rackets, everything that at the end of the tournament, and I gave it away because charities wanted it. They could raise money, and so I would be a part of that, and just thinking back that all the people that have those now. I mean, I hope it does them some good. I hope that it works out well for them. But no, I was not a saver.
So because there's two types of athletes there. What's amazing is Michael Jordan, for who he is and how collectible he is. I was sitting in his office 3 years ago, and he doesn't have a pair of shoes. He actually just doesn't care. Yeah. And he was a giver too.
I'm the same way.
And then you have Emmett, it's like, okay, I won my games. That was it. Emmett Smith, every time he scored a touchdown, get this thing labeled, he's every single ball, so there's two pieces, Yeah. So, but I try to help athletes, get some, so a couple years ago, I started collecting tickets, and, tickets are special because unlike cards, they're like photos, but you can carry them around. So they started grading tickets like you could grade cards. And I came up with my 50 events that I had to collect and have the ticket of. It's expensive. It's expensive to get it back. But what I tried to do, and I'm going to do this with you, Jimmy. Okay. So what I tried to do is when I got one, I tried to get another for the athlete. So when Michael Phelps, I said to Michael Phelps, I said, Michael, do you have, when you won your 8th gold medal in Beijing out of 8 events, do you have that ticket? I said, of course not. I said, okay, So I'm going to send you one. I'll send you one. You're going to autograph it from me. That's your price. I give you the ticket. So I'm going to find you one of these babies. Connors Crickstein right here.
Look at that.
Graded September 2nd.
Awesome.
God, that's unbelievable.
1991. You got the infinity on the back, which is just,
PSA
and it's just so cool because you can carry this around, right? Like,
that's pretty cool.
Tell me that, like, okay, rackets, and how are you going to keep all this stuff? But when you get it, so my goal is I got to find you a second ticket here. By the way, it's not easy. Like, you would be surprised. You'd be like, well, there was 25,000 people at the US Open that day. But again, as years go on and all these things go on, it's like, there were 90,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome for WrestleMania 3 when Hulk Hogan slammed the Giant in 1987. And that was one of my tickets on my list. Well, it took me 2.5 years to find one of those because, again, but that's also the journey, and that's what's cool. And so that's why I love, I have probably a $5-7 million collection, and the things that I collect are completely unique, really cool. Like, so I got to get you that ticket.
I didn't have that foresight or that feeling that, I was busy doing it, and I should have, got a towel from every.
But hold on. Also, in fairness to you, you were busy doing it. And if you were actually thinking about anything else, you wouldn't have been doing it.
No, that's correct. That was my point.
You were focused.
And he's an individual player. Like Emmitt Smith's got like an equipment guy, probably
correct
all the stuff for him. So it's probably just, and you weren't even thinking about that stuff back then. You almost give it to your buddies as like hooking them up. Like, yeah, here, take it. Maybe you can
so I got so my pride and joy are my tickets, and then I have a check collection, which is really insane. And people are like, "What are you talking about? You collect checks?" And basically, like 5 years ago, I went to a show, like a memorabilia show, and the guy handed me a stack of checks, and he said, "These are Bart Giamatti checks, the former commissioner of baseball, and they're all $50." And I'm thinking to myself, how could they all be $50? Maybe one is like the Pete Rose investigation, and the other is you stayed at a Holiday Inn. How could they both be $50? They have different stories.
Right.
And so I realized that people collected checks just because they felt better about the authenticity of the signature, nothing to do with the stories. So I started collecting, so I would reach out to someone and say, I need a Babe Ruth check. And the guy's like, okay. I had a reputation for he's like, what do you want on it? What are you looking for? I'm like, well, he's either paying for a prostitute, he's either eating too much or drinking too much. Find me one of those three. And we're good. And he finds a check for me for Babe Ruth, who, Wally Pipp gets a bad shake because, Lou Gehrig came in and Wally was out and Wally had a headache. Wally was also Babe Ruth's roommate, and those guys pounded a bottle of vodka every night after every game. So don't tell me that guy didn't show up, okay? But anyway, Babe Ruth.
That's my kind of guy.
Babe Ruth filling out a check to the Park Avenue Circle Liquor Shops, which is still on 38th and Madison, New York City, for the equivalent of $15,000 in 1940. Who goes to a liquor store and buys $15,000 worth of stuff? Or Amelia Earhart paying for nose surgery, or John F. Kennedy, his subscription to the Washington Post 3 months before he became president. So like all these weird things, but it's cool. I love it.
What do you think has made it so big? I mean, obviously it's the COVID, people are at home and that stuff, but do you think it's the grading, like the process of turning?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
into like investments.
Right. So in the 80s, when I used to collect and I'd run around and, we'd do card shops at all the dingy places like the Ramada Inns and the Don Carter Lanes and the, Jimmy, you probably had a signing at a Don Carter Lanes or something in Florida, every bowling alleys and hotel lobbies, that was the 80s. And so when we had that, we would say, here's this card, this is mint. And then it'd be like, okay, but how do you know it's more mint than the other? Or once grading came, and once you could say like, this is, like this is graded and this company says it's this mint, and then you could sell it on eBay and there would be a across the board, your card equals my card if they're both a 9. And I think that changed things. And I do think, like even on something like tickets and in autographs, there's so many fake autographs.
Right.
I mean, and obviously, like Jimmy, you know this too. Once you had the scribble at the match, it's like all bets are off, right? Like someone says, like, no, I got this at the match, like, because there's a scribble, and then who would be bad at faking a scribble? So
Right.
so autograph authentication became something that was really big, and we realized that 95% of the stars that we had autographs were fake. So, and then this all brought complexities of sports business. A guy would have a signature, like a baseball player who got paid a lot of money would have a signature for the guy who paid him a lot of money, and then he'd have a hotel signature, right? Like, Barry Bonds had like a BB line, but like for the guy who paid him, it was BARRYBONDS, So, yeah, no, and it's been, I think a lot of people collecting cards, and I do think that memorabilia really is an alternative asset class, not to get too complicated, but when you're a guy, I was talking to a guy, I was getting refinancing my mortgage, and a guy said, he goes, there's a lot of money moving in and out, and I just, we're trying to be safe here. And I go, I've never missed a mortgage payment, sir. He's like, yeah, I know. He's like, but we're just trying to, and I said, let me ask you a question. Okay. I just put like $150,000 into memorabilia. He's like, okay. And I go, what do you think's a safer investment for a return? Doing that or your 0.1% in savings? Like, it's like, as there's inflation and as our money isn't doing anything sitting in a mattress or sitting in a bank,
Right.
these are real alternative asset classes, and people want to grow their money, and growing their money with fun, something
Right.
they can smile at, and especially in COVID, something that they can build community with, is amazing.
Is it here to stay?
I think there are pockets that are here to stay. There are things that, and I always say, if it looks like a bubble, it probably is, right? So you have these modern basketball cards that, come out of a pack, and they're obviously like a 10 of 10. You just pulled them out of the pack. It's not going to look like a 1960 card, and they were selling like crazy. And I think that the modern basketball kind of bubble is probably going to go down. And then there's things that people don't understand. So I'll give you a tennis example. So Serena and Federer cards got hot. And the reason they got hot is because when these cards are graded, the graders put out something called a population report. And that population report means how many they graded. So someone would say when this pandemic started, hey, there are these, 2003 Serena rookie cards, and very few have been graded. Do you know why? Because before COVID, they were $5 and no one would spend $25 to grade them. So we're so into the minutia and the data that we lose, certain things. And by the way, like this company NetPro made like 8 gazillion cards. And I always love, by the way, to remember, having been in the business long enough, when no one cared. I mean, like they have a stand at the US Open and like it's the most blank stand ever. No one's going up to it. Or, the 1986 Fleer set with Michael Jordan in it is probably, the Michael Jordan card got up to 738,000. And I just remember, and again, I'm sorry, I'm just a nostalgic 80s kid. I just remember that in 1986, basketball cards were just not legitimate. It was baseball. So you had, you would look and you'd have a 50 cent a pack Fleer basketball and 50 cent a pack Fleer baseball, and 100 out of 100. Even though I went to see Michael Jordan and loved basketball, you would take that baseball pack. And today, a box of those 1988 Fleer, if it's sealed in baseball, you can get for $15. The box of the 86 basketball sealed, $400,000.
Wow.
So so it's like, and it's the same thing like the 1952 tops. I remember they couldn't give those away in 1986. They couldn't hand them to you. So I think they're going to be bubbles. But I think there's things that are new. I think sealed music is going to be big. I think sealed toys are going to be big. You're already seeing like Star Wars. You're seeing stuff. Whenever there's something that maybe wasn't supposed to be collectible to start, and people started opening them. Sealed video games now are going crazy. Now, it's like, who for Hanukkah and Christmas said, "Hey, thanks, Mom. I'm not going to open this up. I'm going to put this I'm going to store this away for safekeeping. This is going to be worth something." But it's like, how many, knowing that it was never conceived as a collectible, the scarcity is just insane. And I have comfort in my collections in things that are so small. So among my 50 on my list, I got my Connors-Darren, but I also have, I'm like, I want to find the ticket when Newt Rockne said at halftime, "Win one for the Gipper." How hard am I going to have to look to get that? And I found it, 1928 Notre Dame Army at Yankee Stadium. There's 5 in the world. I will never have to worry about pretty much anything with that, because there's going to be 5 in the world now, and there might be 4 tomorrow. There won't be 6. There will never be 6. The other one was, again, I'm like, how am I going to find this? And I love the chase. I said, I have to get Jesse Owens becoming fastest man in the world in front of Hitler. I mean, that is just like the most ridiculous thing ever. Hitler has his 1936 Beijing Olympics, and he's doing the whole Aryan white race thing. And a black guy kicks the shit out of everyone in the fastest man in the world race. Like, that's a little bit of a problem. So I got that ticket too. And it's like, again, you look at these things and it's just amazing. So as long as you, when you're collecting, I always tell people, try to zig when other people are zagging. Don't follow. If you follow, you're going to be subject to the people who you're following, right? If a guy is overextended and he bought 50 of these things and you have 3, he's going to want to sell them so he could take money off the table. Then the market's flooded. Then that's your problem.
Yeah,
boy,
it's crazy how it's become such a business.
It's not, never even thought of that.
It's not kids at the stores. It's almost guys investing or looking at it more as like a grown-up thing.
Oh yeah, and they do have a problem in that, right?
We used to do it for the bubble gum.
The bubble gum,
the piece of bubble gum.
Sure, Tops was a bubble gum company, and they used cards to try to get you to eat their bubble gum. It was, but
didn't they just sell Tops? Didn't we see something?
Yeah, they sold Top. Well, a SPAC acquired it for $1.3 billion, and yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think you have a problem, and I think this is a problem in tennis, and I think there's a problem in college football, and I think there's a problem everywhere. The money is with the adults right now. But if you don't get the kids in, you're done for the future. And so you have to think about what is the cost of you not getting the kids. So I think about tennis, and I always think about this, and obviously I'm sure you guys have talked ad nauseum about the American men's game, and how it is kind of nationalistic, and people just haven't had a major since Roddick in 2003, and it's like, that's just the craziest drought since the beginning of time. And
as your tennis, what's up? I mean,
you've
been a tennis fan since the beginning?
I've been a tennis fan since the beginning. I used to get day 1 of the U.S. Open, get my draw sheet, get my mini pencil, and I would put in Thomas Engqvist, and I'd put in the Woodies and I'd put them all, and I know them all, and that was great, that was the best. So yeah, I think I'd like to see kids in the first 4 rows at the U.S. Open. I've talked to athletic directors about this. They have the donors in the best seats at the football stadiums, and they put the kids in the corner. And it's like, well, then they say the kids don't want to stay. Well, you gave them the shittiest seats.
Right. That's the truth.
And then when those people are donors, you're going to say, well, why aren't they here? because you didn't put them at the 50-yard line and they watched on TV and they don't feel the relationship. So like, again, that's the catch-22 with cards and memorabilia. Right now, it's like, that's where the money is. But if my kids aren't opening packs, they're not going to be there in 10 years.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it seems like tennis.
I used to love going to the qualifiers at the U.S. Open. I go on the LIRR and watch, the real guys gut it out. And, people not realizing, like, when you see that queue next to a draw sheet at the U.S. Open, damn, that guy's played five matches in 5 days.
Just to get in.
just to get in. And what's crazy is the difference. So when I became a sports business reporter, I said, you know what, I want to follow the 100th ranked tennis player in the world, the 100th ranked golfer in the world, and they have to be able to open up all their books. Man, the 100th ranked tennis player in the world, when I was doing that, was breaking even. I mean, he Matthias Boker from Georgia. He's the NCAA champion. He was, I went to Lexington. I saw, while he's serving, the Chick-fil-A cow is walking in the background. I mean, it's not exactly the most glorious thing in the world.
No, absolutely not.
So it's so hard. So I've appreciated, I think a lot of people just look at the tennis stars, and I've appreciated some of the journey and been to some of these lower level tournaments and laugh when the guy who covers tennis betting at the Action Network where I work is betting more on the tournament than the poor guy who, if he wins the match, is going to make. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, it seems like tennis is usually last to adapt to a lot of the new technologies or whatever it is, and they've been slow to adapt to the gambling. And I wanted to talk to you. I mean, you say you have a guy at the Action Network. How is tennis viewed overall? Like in your world, is it lagging behind? Is there a lot?
I mean, I think to some.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, to some it's seen as a good. To some it's seen as a good value because it's like women's basketball. It is what it is. The games happen and no one's paying attention to it, especially at those, challenger level matches. And if you really know down deep and you can research, you got a good chance. And it's pretty simple from a betting standpoint. There are hockey and baseball sometimes can get a little bit complicated. Tennis is just pretty much money line, who's going to win. I mean, that's the big thing. And you're live betting someone who's down 2 sets to love, come all the way back. But yeah, no, there are these, tennis is because of the conflict of how little some of these guys get paid and that you can bet things on them. Obviously we've had the Russians and a lot of issues with either people throwing matches because they can make more money by throwing a match than winning it. That's a little bit of a problem. And then there are these courtsiders who sit by the court and try to jump the electronic feed, essentially calling in like what happens so that if you get a split second early, you can bet on something after the point has been played, but then you can bet it, right? I mean, like it's crazy. That's crazy. So I think it's rife with cheating because of, again, what I said. But I think tennis is a good sport. How
do you get around that? Is there any way?
Well, you look at the college players, right? You'd think that the college players, they would be the most suspect to try to, they don't have, like, for college basketball or college football. Why don't you pay them? They're making nothing. But what's happened is some of the states have said, a lot of the states actually have said, you can't gamble on college sports in this state because they don't want the guys compromised. I think it's, for some point in tennis, if there's a threshold, there's either got to be a maximum bet on smaller tournaments, or you can't bet those at all. It can't be. I mean, it's just too easily compromised and too much of a black eye for tennis, I think. It's not, those guys are playing to get up, but I mean, you can't have, thousands and thousands of dollars being bet on guys who are above 1,000 in the world. It just can't happen. And the nature of them playing in New Delhi and in some of these markets, make it a lot more sketchier, because there could be someone on the ground who can easily stop them and compromise them.
Mhm.
Yeah. And some of these tournaments are played in parks, and I mean, they even put like challenges.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have high hopes for tennis. I mean, when I look at the U.S. Open and I look at Flushing Meadows, and I see it's like a Disneyland what they built. The greatest food, the greatest everything. But I just hope that in the largesse that it is and how big it is now, that the charm doesn't go away. And I feel like obviously the women's game from an American standpoint has been great, but from the men's standpoint, I think it's really hurt. And we've said, hey, Jack Sock, it's Tiafoe, it's going to be all these guys, and they get up, they're moving up, and then it's like we don't get far enough. So I think, I hope and pray that we get there from an American man's standpoint sometime soon.
So what you said it, that they make the events like the U.S. Open and a lot of the bigger tournaments here in the United States, they almost make them a destination.
Correct.
For the food and for the weather, for the entertainment, and
they should call it everything but the tennis.
That's kind of my point. And then, oh, by the way, there's a tennis match going on too. Is that taking away from the game and the tennis itself?
I think it's a little bit of a distraction. I think from a men's game standpoint, the distraction is almost meant to happen, right? Like, because if you're a fan of men's tennis, men's American tennis, if you want to bring people in, you have to have the distractions, because we're just we're not getting there, right? So you're actually protecting yourself by making a Disneyland around it. But yeah, no, it's much harder to actually get on the court. I want people to love tennis, and this could be, maybe I'm just hypocritical here, but I just think when I see so many people on the big courts, and I just want to scream to people and say, just go to the smaller courts and just have some room and sit down on those metal, or stand up in between those two courts and just be at the ball, watch the pace of the ball, watch it hit the court, watch the spin, because it's totally different in a big stadium. You really can't enjoy watching tennis 70 rows up. You can't. Right. It's ping pong. It's not. And so I don't know. I always want to tell people, like, just do that. Get as close as you can to great pro tennis. And, I think tennis is always going to be what it is. I think in a way it's like the NHL and hockey. It's like, it's never going to be the biggest, but I think it should just be as good as it could be. And I don't know if it is right now. I know that as a big tennis fan, for the 4 slams, I'm all in. But you're going to try to talk to me about the Masters or Cincinnati or Lipton or whatever, Miami Open, I'm not there.
Right.
I'm not there.
So what row were you in at my Crickstein match?
I was far up. Actually, yeah, I was far up on that one. That
should have given me one of these. I'd have brought you down.
I wasn't the one who said, "I love you, Jimmy."
No. There was only one.
Yeah, there was only one. I wasn't the screamer, but
the good ticket would be the McEnroe Patrick, because so many people left that match early.
Yes,
and then he's had probably 100,000 people tell him that I was the one who stayed at that match. I was one of the few people who stayed.
The Crickstein match. There was one. Which one went late into the night? I don't remember that one. Which
Patrick
Patrick went late into the night. So I had correct. And there was a juniors match after that. It was Ricky Becker of Stanford against J.J. Jackson, who was the number 1 seed in the junior tournament. And Ricky Becker was the number 1 player at my high school. So my brother and I were there until it was like it was the biggest mistake I made since going to an 11:30 performance of Dances with Wolves, and I got out at like 4 a.m, being like, "What is going on here?" But yeah, no, they played that juniors match after you guys, and I remember I was there too. So man, I mean, it's just great memories, and thank you for giving me great memories. And it was always great, right? September 2nd was always your birthday. Had the cake.
Good day.
Yeah.
Darren, we talked a couple of weeks ago. Brett and I did a podcast, and we tried to explain NFTs.
Oh my God! And I can do it. I can do it.
Well, yeah, and we didn't do a very good job, and we had a lot of replies that said, "What in the hell is an NFT?" So can you kind of
let me? I'm going to do it in 2 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to start from a high level, but I'll go very slow. Something that is fungible is automatically changed into money. So if I have 2 Bitcoin, that is worth $100,000, right? I could always change Bitcoin into dollars. If something is non-fungible, that means that on its face, it has no worth. I can't take this 1991 US Open ticket, bring it to a bank, give it to the teller, and the teller gives me $10. Now, there might be value to it that someone ascribes, but it on its face does not have value. So an NFT is a non-fungible token that what it is connected to, whether it's a piece of art, again, that might have value by itself, but what it's connected to does not have any value that you could bring to a bank or that you can immediately exchange for money. The reason why it's called an NFT is for security reasons. So you put something on what's called the blockchain. And so there are 49 pieces of art, and I own number 7 out of 49. So when I say you own a 1952 Mickey Mantle Topps rookie card, do you own the photo of Mickey Mantle?
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't own the photo of Mickey Mantle. You own the rights to buy and to sell that card, that one card. It's the same thing with an NFT. I could own a highlight of an NBA game, and I have number 7 out of 79. Okay. And I don't own that highlight. When it runs on SportsCenter, I don't get a dividend. When it runs on YouTube, I'm not getting credit, but I have the right to sell that one associated with a highlight. So I've covered this every day, and I haven't gotten into it with the exception of one. I think that NFTs connected to games are where money is. So I own a stable of digital horses, believe it or not. And Jimmy, I swear I'm not on LSD right now. Okay. I own a stable of digital horses that race fake races for real money. Okay. Try to stay with me here. They fake breed fake horses, and I get real money. Okay.
I picked a bad time to give up drinking.
It's like coming to America when the guy goes, "Son, lay off the drugs." It's hard and it's challenging.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So how did you get into that?
What do you say? How did I get into it?
Yeah,
because I watch my kids. I have a 7-year-old twin boys and a 9-year-old girl, and I watch them play these games. And Dad, can I have $9 for a fake jersey on my digital character? Crazy. My son thinks he's like building an aquarium. And one day I look at my American Express card, and I'm like, it charges me $50 for a virtual shark. I'm like, you got to sit down here, okay? Because somehow I got debited for a fake shark in your aquarium.
It's find a way to make money.
Oh man!
Hey, there's a reason that game Roblox, that my kids play is like, they have like a $30 billion IPO. No wonder 29 billion was from me.
That's crazy. So you race them, and
You race the horses. There's all these algorithms, right? Like if you buy, it's just like the real race. If you buy a Nakamoto Japanese horse, like that's the best of the best, and then you have to figure out the distances, and it's in the beginning, so I'm just kind of learning. But I just love the complex game behind it. It's not just, oh, here's an NBA highlight, I own it. I like complex math, data, all that type of stuff, and playing that game. Clearly, it's like an adult type game. But these are what's funny is the reason I knew it was something big is there's a bunch of guys who've made $4 or $5 million over the past couple of years just playing fantasy sports. Right? They write that. I know, right? They write algorithms. They select the right lineups. They take advantage of numbers, what people aren't doing. They're playing fantasy sports and they're winning $1 million prize 3, 4, 5 times in a row.
Wow.
Or over a certain amount. These guys got into this horse game and I saw them and, they're starting to figure out how to win every race every time.
Wow.
That's what it is. So that gave me a little bit more confidence that I was in the right place. But it's hard. I what's weird about the NFT world is I've had friends come to me and say, "Hey, I bought this piece of NFT art. What do you think of it?" I said, "Do you invest in real art?" And they'd be like, "No." I'm like, "Okay, so now that it's digital, you have more confidence that you know what real art is." I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. If you have real art and you think you can analyze real art, right? And you think you know the value of real art, fine. But if you just got into art because there's digital art and it's easy to click a button and spend $5,000 on it, I don't give you a chance.
Didn't they just one of the women tennis players? Didn't they?
Yeah, there was a tennis play. Yeah, they called it like an NFT because it was sold on an NFT site, but it's basically like a tattoo advertisement. And she was like,
sponsor deal or something.
350 in the world or something like that. I think she should work on her strokes.
Yeah, they just threw the word NFT in there because they knew it would grab headlines.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
good. Yeah, I was going to say that when you started explaining, I told Brett when we kind of dabbled in it a couple of weeks ago. You lost me at digital. It's hard for me to grab on and to really understand that. I mean, it seems. You said you can explain it in 2 minutes. I mean, that's 2 minutes to people who understand. I mean, It's still hard for me to grab onto something like that.
And that makes sense. I mean, it's the way that 20-year-olds talk about this metaverse and this digital world and this world that's not in front of our eyes. No wonder it takes them so long to get to sleep.
That's right.
It seems like it's the future, and it's hard to understand because we're coming from the past.
I've invested in crypto, and it's like but I haven't 5 years ago. And like Jimmy, you were talking about you feeling bad because you didn't keep your cards. A lot of people have the fear of missing out that they didn't get in on crypto, and now all of a sudden people have fortunes on it. But, I go back to like in 2014 when someone said to me, you invest in crypto. And I say, let me ask you a question. What happens if someone comes up to you and says, hey, there's this company. Don't know if it has a CEO. Don't know if there are any earnings. Don't know anything about it. You want to put 100,000 in? No, I don't want to put $100,000.
I've invested in a few of those companies already.
Oh man, I know. Yeah, sounded good in the locker room when you were talking it up. Hey, there's this great place to eat called Planet Hollywood. Let's whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you did actually, you went on your own from a sports marketing. You had your own Jimmy Connors shirts, and you did that before other people really thought about doing that. Was that because you didn't like the deals that were coming to you, or what? I mean, obviously it was at the end of your career, I think like 90, 91, 92. I remember like that wasn't a cactus, was it? What was the four, whatever?
It was 3 J's and C, JC. 3 J's, 3 C's.
Why did you do that?
Well, back, when I first started, I mean, I came and didn't have any money. So when I first came out, I could have been connected with a number of that have turned out to be big time corporate sports companies.
Right, like an ING.
No, with Nike or Adidas.
Oh yeah, sure,
or,
sure.
or whatever. And
yeah, Ili Nastase was the first Nike spokesman.
Yeah, and the old Wimbledon tennis shoes, the first ones, I was wearing those also, and
Phil Knight offered him stock because he couldn't afford him being number one in the world. He couldn't afford to pay him what he was probably worth. Offered him stock, and because
another disgusting moment.
Hey, listen, I've had a few. I've had a few. So but I didn't have any money. So so I went with I had my own shoes, and I had my own clothes, and I had my own racket, my Wilson tennis racket, and so I didn't get with one company, to outfit me. Which, as I look back, was it a mistake? Yeah, I don't know. I did okay for the time, and I was happy with my deals and so forth. Problem is, a lot of the companies that I were with went by the wayside, and the other ones are still around and still doing gangbusters. But I'm not.
One of the things that I always thought has become ridiculous in the past 15 years is when an agent does a marketing deal for a racket, and the racket doesn't work out. Like Maria Sharapova did a deal. I forgot the racket with the O ports in it, where there's actually holes in the racket. You can't paint those things on. You can't paint holes. And within 7 months, so one thing that was good about you is you always had the racket that you wanted to play with. And as I started covering this space, and I got in a epic. I wish I had a videotape of it. Damn, I got an epic fight with Leighton Hewitt in 2004 when after he won the U.S. Open 4 or 5, I can't remember. Yonex put out a something with the racket that Leighton the racket that Leighton plays with, and then I said, yeah, but that's not your racket. You actually play with the first racket from 3 years ago, but it's painted to look like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a whole back and forth about, no, I use that racket. I'm like, no, actually you definitely don't.
I think I'm not saying this is hearsay, but I think there was a few Picassos in the past.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, you had to find a racket that you could play with, and I was lucky. I picked up that the T2000, and I mean, it was just like an extension of my arm. I was lucky, and when I had to get rid of that racket in the mid 80s, and I think it was 1986, broke my heart, and it broke my game. I mean, I never really found
because you can't feel you can never get over the lack of weight when that tech changed in 87, 88, and then 1990 when everyone was going it has to be light graphite.
Right.
Man, you looked at Sampras and he's like, no, I'm going to play with that Wilson profile until the day I die.
Right.
And that was smart. He had the same damn racket.
You find something and you stick with it, so, but the game's changed, and that's the way it is. And if you're a tennis fan, a golf fan, sports fan, you go along with the changes, and you enjoy it just as much, I guess. Right.
The game. This is me questioning you as a reporter, so I'm sorry I'm taking this over. But the game definitely did change towards the end of your years. It became a game of power instead of strategy, right? I mean,
well, the equipment certainly did that.
Yeah.
With the change of equipment and the days of the imagination of a Nastase or a McEnroe, or changing your game and having 3 or 4 ways to play. Not really right after me, but I think more the generation after that, after Sampras, after Curry, or after Chang, after Edberg, after Becker and guys like that.
Turned into the 3-point, the 3 rally point in men's tennis.
Yeah. Well,
Which then led to the homogenization of the game, where all the surfaces are very similar and all the guys.
I mean, I hate to be at 42, the white man yelling at clouds, but having seen the game of the 80s, when rallies, when to me, it was a more beautiful game.
Well, I look back. I was privileged to be a part of it when I was playing, and with the guys that I grew up with, and who were all their own characters and had their own personality and their own style of game, and what they did at that time over those 10, 12, 15 years to help move the game forward was so much fun. And still friends with some of them today, but we get older and life changes. So, we kind of all go on, we all move on.
It's amazing.
It's been a blast being with you.
This was a treat. This was a treat for me, lifelong fan. And, I'm getting you that, that ticket's going to arrive. I'm getting you that ticket. You need that ticket. I'm going to slab it up nice for you. And at least you'll have one thing from, one of your, the funny thing, Crickstein got out of tennis and then he became an exotic fish salesman, which was kind of crazy because I was looking him up, trying to talk to him. And I was like, wow, he became an exotic fish salesman. Wow. That's something different. I got one more thing that I forgot to tell you on the checks because it's a treat. I don't know if I could quickly find it. I might be able to quickly find it. Maybe not. But it is. So I have the greatest football coach of all time paying one of the greatest tennis coaches of all time for a tennis lesson. I have Vince Lombardi paying Nick Bollettieri for a tennis lesson. And I got it in an auction. And I called up Nick and I said, Nick, I got a treat for you. He goes, what do you got? I said, I have something that I got to know what the real story is. So you're going to help me get to the bottom of it. I got Vince Lombardi paying you for a tennis lesson. And, Nick's getting up there. But he said to me, I know what year it is. And I go, get out of here. He goes, oh, I know what year it is. I said, what year was it? He goes, it's 1964. I go, it is 1964. You are right. He goes, really? I said, now, why would you know that? He goes, because in 1964, I was in Puerto Rico as the tennis coach of the Rockefellers, and Vince Lombardi came to visit. And I go, well, you still haven't answered the question, because if you were the tennis coach of the Rockefellers, what the hell is Vince Lombardi paying you $17.64 for a tennis lesson? The Rockefellers didn't take care of you? You needed that $17.64? Hey, every little bit that's a great one. That's also another wacko one that I cherish. But it was a pleasure talking to you guys. I've enjoyed this immensely, and let's stay in touch.
Love to.
Yeah.
Good being with you. Thanks, Darren.
You got it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.